All right, guys, we are back with this similar format. I guess it's like a lecture format, and I quite like it, so we're going to stick with this for now. Today we are going to talk about fasting for fat loss. This is one of the basal method pillars. We have fasting, walking, and minimalist strength training. So a common question I get when I advocate for fasting is why not calorie counting? And it's because calorie counting has a low adherence rate. It's inaccessible for most. It's quite confusing especially if you're doing it for the first time. It's frustrating and tedious, and it is unsustainable. I've mentioned this before, but I work with clients in person. So I didn't get my start in fitness or in training working with people online. So I work with real people just like you. And I'm telling you right now that the vast majority of people have zero interest in counting their calories day in and day out, even if they have body composition goals. I know some trainers want to argue, I know some trainers would argue that you just don't care enough if you have no desire to count. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. You have to be able to adhere to whatever method you're using to put you into a calorie deficit. Again, we're talking about fat loss in order to actually achieve that fat loss goal. So adherence is the most important aspect when it comes to choosing a diet or choosing the way in which you decide to create that energy deficit. It is inaccessible. So, people start counting and they don't know, should I count my food before I cook it, after I cook it? Am I supposed to be weighing all of my vegetables to the gram? It just ends up being this tedious, frustrating process. And I also say this from experience because I've counted calories several times in several different periods of my life. I've tried to count calories. And each and every time do I come to the conclusion that it is extremely annoying, tedious, frustrating, and also unnecessary. All right. So why fasting? So fasting, basically everything is the complete opposite of what I've just explained for the calorie counting. There's a higher adherence rate, and I'll actually link a study in the description of this video to prove that to you. But fasting, intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, time-restricted eating, whatever you want to call it, has a higher adherence rate than counting calories. There has to be a reason why the vast majority of people who try to lose weight, I think it's 90% of people who lose weight are unable to keep it off. And that's because that's because whatever method they use to lose the weight, they are unable to sustain long-term to keep it off. Whatever you do, for the most part, generally speaking, whatever you do to lose the weight, you're going to have to do some variation of that to keep the weight off. So fasting has a higher adherence rate. It is far more accessible. It's easy to follow. It has a very simple structure, which all of those honestly kind of go together. And it is sustainable, which feeds back into the adherence. If it's sustainable, it's more likely that you will adhere to it. Now, the other benefits that I've seen anecdotally and I've seen through clients who utilize fasting is that you have a better understanding of your hunger. In this day and age, the vast majority of us don't know what it feels like to be hungry because we're never hungry. We're constantly eating, we're constantly snacking, we're constantly grazing. By fasting, you teach yourself what hunger actually feels like. Now, hunger isn't a craving. It's not you feeling dehydration. The feeling of hunger is very, very clear, and it becomes clearer the more you fast and the more you force your body to deal with and experience hunger. I've also noticed, and this is going to go into some anecdotes, mental clarity. When I fast, I feel like I'm just able to focus, and I actually look forward to that feeling. I wouldn't say the feeling of hunger, but I feel like I'm able to put my energy towards my work, and it's not going to digesting food. I don't get those midday lulls of being sluggish, the itis after you eat. I just feel light and I feel clear of mind. The final benefit is you get to save money because you are spending less money on food. You're not snacking nearly as frequently, and you're probably not even eating as many meals as you would eat if you could just eat all day throughout the day. Okay, so how do you start this? Again, this is very, very simple, and I'm going to throw in some of the basal standards to further explain this. So the rules of engagement. Calories still count. Fasting is not magic, okay? Just because you're eating within the proper eating window doesn't mean that those calories, are worth less than if you were to eat them outside of the eating window. What fasting does is it creates a deficit because it constrains the time in which you're able to eat. So what I tell people to do is, let's say you're used to eating breakfast at, 8 a.m. You eat lunch at 12, and then you eat dinner at 6. If your eating window, if you're doing a 16-8 fast, for example, and you're eating from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., that basically means you're no longer eating breakfast. You are cutting those calories out. You are not now moving breakfast into the eating window, because that completely defeats the purpose of why I utilize fasting and why you're going to utilize fasting. It's not magic. So anyone telling you that fasting is magic, no, it's not. It's just a very simple way to restrict the calories. That feeds into the next point, and that is you have to eat sensibly. Again, this is not an excuse to pig out in your eating window. You still have to eat with common sense, and I suggest you follow the basal add then subtract framework, where you add first. So you add proteins first, you add fiber first, you add water. So when you're auditing your diet, instead of thinking about, okay, what are all the things I can take out and cut out? I want you to think about what you can add, and these are the 3 things you should focus on adding. Fiber, just think fruits and vegetables. Water, that's obvious. And protein, you're thinking meats, fish, eggs, yogurt, etc. Then once that becomes a habit, once you're increasing that fiber intake, protein intake, water intake, and that becomes a habit, then you can focus on subtracting. So subtract the highly processed foods, the junk foods, I don't care what you want to call it, unhealthy for you, an indulgence, whatever, semantics, whatever semantics you want to get into with that, that's up to you. But we all know what I'm talking about when I say highly processed foods, these highly palatable, calorie-dense foods. For the most part, you want to get rid of them. You want to cut out the snacking. Again, the fasting helps with that. But there's no reason that you need to have a snack in between breakfast and lunch, and then a snack between lunch and dinner, and then a post-dinner snack, which is after dessert. That's completely unnecessary. If you're snacking that frequently, it's probably a good sign that your diet needs to be adjusted and there's something else missing why you feel the need to snack, or there's something missing emotionally or mentally and you're using snacking to fill some void, but that is a whole other conversation. The next thing you want to subtract is excuses. Stop making excuses as to why you can't eat sensibly. Stop making excuses as to why you can't follow a healthy, nutritious diet. You need to completely get rid of that, and that's going to make fat loss, or really any goal you have, much, much easier. So stop excusing yourself, okay? Have standards, stick to what you say you're going to do, stick to not doing what you say you're not going to do. The next point is to adjust your window according to your current eating habits, good and bad. So what does that mean? For me, for example, I am a chronic late night snacker, okay? Past 8 p.m., all bets are off. I'm raiding the cabinet. I'm getting candy. I'm getting chips. I'm getting cereal. I'm getting everything. So what does that mean for me? My eating window most days ends at 6 p.m., sometimes sooner. And I actually feel better when I wake up in the morning and I feel like my food has fully digested. When I have that first meal, I'm actually hungry and ready for it. I don't feel like there's constantly just food sitting in my stomach. You know that feeling? You wake up in the morning and your dinner is still sitting there, and then you go and have breakfast, and then that breakfast is sitting on top of the dinner. You just feel heavy and bloated. I don't feel that way. But back to the point is, because I know that I'm a late night snacker, I've put my eating window in a place to end at 6 p.m. to completely get rid of those unnecessary calories. So you might be a late night snacker, you might be an early morning snacker. You can identify yourself what your eating habits are and what bad habits you would like to alleviate. Put the window somewhere where it makes that decision clear and easier, if that makes sense. All right, let's get into the protocols. So we have 16-8. You've probably heard of this before. This is for beginners. If you've never fasted before, you definitely should start here. This is what I mentioned earlier. Most people, when they start 16-8, they have their first meal at 12 p.m. and their last meal at 8 p.m. Again, feel free to change the start and end, the start time and end time according to your eating habits and according to your lifestyle. But 16-8 for beginners, if you've never fasted, start there. 18-6 is the basal standard. This is what I follow the vast majority of the time. And I'm able to maintain appropriate level of body fat for my preferences, a very sustainable level of body fat for my lifestyle. And again, I feel the best eating with this window. Like I said, I'm able to wake up feeling like my food has fully digested. I'm able to feel light. I don't feel sluggish. My mental clarity is at an all-time high. And in terms of fat loss, usually when I've gained weight, it's because I'm not utilizing any sort of protocol or eating standard. But this will absolutely get you lean. If you want to start seeing some ab definition, start with 18-6, and I promise you, you're going to be surprised at how the body fat just starts to fall off. Now, these are estimates, like visual estimates, but 18-6, generally speaking, will probably get women sub 22% body fat, and will probably get men sub 18% body fat. Again, this is very sustainable. Now, the final protocol, basal lean 24, I've never used this protocol like consecutively day in and day out for an extended period of time. Usually what I'll do is, for example, out of a week, 4 days out of the week, I'll do 18-6, and then 3 days out of the week, I'll do the 24. And what that looks like for me is I'll have 1 meal per day plus a protein shake. And again, the fasting makes it, yes, I definitely experience some levels of hunger because I am losing body fat, but it curbs my hunger enough to make this doable and approachable rather than spreading out my calories throughout the entire day and having to eat 300 calories there. I would rather not do that. I'd rather just sit down, eat a sizable meal, have a protein shake, and do it like that. So if you do 18-6 and you want to get even leaner, I suggest you use that method that I just said, where you throw in days where you're using the basal lean protocol. For women, you can expect to achieve sub 18% body fat, and for men sub 14. If you're doing this consistently, like I said, I do not think this is as sustainable just to do it every day, but you are your own person, so you can decide that for yourself. I suggest for everything I say, for all of these protocols, you always play with it and test it yourself. Don't take my word for it, test it. I've included a picture here to show you guys what I've been able to achieve using 18-6. Like I said, this is the basal standard. Very sustainable, and I'm able to easily, honestly, effortlessly sustain this level of body fat eating in this way. Okay, where do people go wrong? I don't know why that's left there, sorry. People are inconsistent, and this is beyond fasting. This has to do with people's training. This has to do with people's goals, whatever that may be. People are just inconsistent. So they watch this video, they're like, great, I've never fasted before, I'm going to do the 16-8, and they do it for 2 weeks. And then they stop for a few days. They're like, well, I'm actually, I have this event. I'm going to this wedding, so I can't do it. It's unrealistic. And then they fall off and they get back on. And again, we're back with, what did I say earlier? You're back with the excuses. You need to stop making excuses, and you need to start being consistent. Your results are on the other side of relentless consistency. relentless consistency. So consistency, even when you don't want to be consistent, right? And that right there is discipline. Where else do people go wrong? People eat like an asshole. So like I said, fasting is not a magic bullet, okay? It's not just going to make calories not count. Calories still count. Eat sensibly. Follow the principles that I listed above that I shared with you. And if you're consistent, if you eat sensibly, I promise you this will work. It works, okay? It works. Another area where people go wrong, I also mentioned this earlier. This kind of goes into here. So let's move that. Doop. I don't want to say fasting is not magic. Okay, just so you have that. People don't adjust their eating window. So like I said, audit your diet, but also audit your habits, okay? Every person is different. Some people, have a big breakfast and they snack a bunch before lunch. If you know you do that, move your eating window so it's right after lunch or so that it starts at lunch. If you're a late night snacker like me, move your eating window so that it's cut off right before you notice you're getting those cravings. And what that's going to do for you, it's going to teach you that, number one, a craving is not hunger. And number two, that when you have these cravings, you are able to ignore them. And once you teach yourself that you're able to ignore them, I don't know, there's just something very powerful about that, at least for me, and realizing like I can say no. Like when I go out to eat and I know that I'm full, I know that I've enjoyed myself, and people are like, oh, you want another round of this, or do you want to get dessert? I know that I'm able to say no, and there's something very powerful about that. But we live in a world right now where everything is so accessible, right? Food is so accessible. You can get food delivered to you. If you go downstairs, especially if you live in a city, there's food right there. You can get in your car and drive to a McDonald's or a drive-through. That's really easy. If you live with kids or even not with kids, like there's probably snacks and stuff in your pantry. Like there's just the food accessibility is at an all-time high. And that makes achieving these body composition goals that much harder. So learning how to say no and trusting in yourself that you can say no is such a powerful skill to have. And you adjusting your eating window to force yourself to develop that skill is invaluable. We under 20 minutes. I know my last video was long. I'm trying to keep these short and to the point. But I will share this document down below. If you are interested, I do one-to-one online coaching. I also have some programs online available right now. I have a 5-week reset program. It's a all-in fitness guide. And then if anyone is interested in doing 75 hard but doesn't really know where to start, I have a follow-along 75 hard program. But again, all of this content that I have here is free and accessible to you. And I hope you learned something from this, and I will see you in the next one.